In this video we're going to be restoring this BBC Micro Model B power supply, which has ceremoniously gone pop. This contains two X2 RIFA capacitors which are notorious for doing this. I don't know which one's gone pop. I suspect it's this one because it's a bit charred around it. So we've got one here that we need to replace, and there's another one tucked here behind the power switch, which also needs replacing. I think the rest of the power supply looks okay, even though the blue smoke that makes it works escapes. I may give it a bit of a dust. Oh yes, there we go. It's definitely this one that's gone. I can see the outer casing's gone. I don't know if you can see it there in the video. Let's see if we can get a close up. You see the outer casing there. I'll see if I can move it. It's jammed in behind that component there. The capacitor kits for these are widely available. You don't need to replace all of the capacitors on the board unless they look damaged, and I think on the whole these look okay. These kits are widely available on eBay, and we have here a selection. So I've got two lots of. So I've got a BBC Master 128 power supply to also refurb. While I'm at it, you get the capacitors, and this seller's also thoughtfully included ties and insulation as well, and it also had grommets. Okay, so we've got replacement grommets. So this costs about £5 for two lots of. You don't have to pay an awful lot for these. So the next step is to start disassembling this power supply so I can get to the back of the board, because as you can see there's no access there to the circuit board for me to unsolder these capacitors. So the first thing we're going to do is take a photograph of everything so that I know where everything goes, specifically this bit here, so I know where, because I think I'll be taking these connectors out in order to remove the power switch. The first thing we need to do is get rid of these cable ties, I guess. The seller also helpfully provided instructions which we'll be referring to periodically. So let's carefully clip this one, making sure I don't cut the wires. So I can remove the power switch. Yeah. There we go. That's one down. I also got one here. It's a bit easier to cut without trimming the wires. There we go. I don't think there's any more to do. So the next thing we need to do is remove the power switch. So to do that, I'm going to wiggle these connectors free. I might need a little bit of a... Let's have a look here. Use my pliers to encourage them. They can be a bit stiff, these. So it's a little bit of a... Oh dear. Not kidding, these are stiff. Trying to avoid pulling on the wires to avoid damaging the crimps. Wow, these are in tight. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video at this point whilst I struggle with these. I'll come back to you in a second. So I removed the wires now. Basically, it's just brute force, just holding onto them with a pair of pliers and gently tugging them. So I've got to be careful with this red wire. I think the black wire too. They look like they're soldered to the board. So I think the connection's still sound on the board there. So just be careful when you wiggle them, you don't disconnect those by mistake. The next step is to push the switch out. To do that, I don't know if you can see it in the video. Oh, there we go. Get my pointer. There are some clips here. You can see them? So you've got to push these clips down. There's one on either side. And then we're going to push the connector out through the case that way, out of the case, not into the case. So let's have a crack at that now. Hopefully this will be easier than removing the connectors. So push one down, push two down at the same time. Oh dear, this is where I need 4 hands, isn't it? There you go, that one's out, that side's out. And let's just get this side out now. Push that one in. And last one. You will come out. There we go. I think that's nearly it now, isn't it? Just needs a little bit more of a... Get to it on the other side, I think. Maybe not. There you go. So now the switch should just pull out. So I remember which way that goes. I'll put it there so I don't forget. It's the contacts at the bottom. I suppose it'd be easy to put this in upside down, wouldn't it? So contacts at the bottom. That's fairly straightforward. I'll take a picture of that just so I know that it is contacts at the bottom. Always worthwhile taking pictures of things when you're disassembling stuff, because you never know. When you're putting it back together, you might wonder how things work. So the low voltage side connector, I think this is floppy drives, this connector, isn't it? It's the one that's usually exposed at the back of the BBC. Not terribly familiar with the hardware, I'll give you that. I assume that's the case. This comes out as well. There's more tabs that we need to push in. This fella goes into the case. So let's have a look where the tabs are. I think there's just those at the top. See what we're doing? I think it's these tabs here and here, and similarly here and here. There's 4 tabs that I need to push in so I can get this connector pushed into the case. So here it goes. 1, 2. It's a bit easier than the power supply switch, just simply because we've got more access to it. So it's 3 and 4. I've already got a photograph of that, so I know which way that goes. I'm not going to disassemble the wires on this. No need. Just attached to the board. The final step, I guess, is to remove the 3 screws that hold this board in place. Yes. Oh, there's an earth there, isn't there? There's an earth strap there that looks like it's going to the transformer, so that'll have to come out as well. Okay. That's easily done now, isn't it? That's just a Phillips screw at the top there. So let's get this board unbolted now then. Screwdriver sorted. Quite exciting, this. And get to all the screws. 1. What does that say? Warning. Oh, it's worth pointing out, by the way, talking about warnings, that if your power supply has actually been plugged in recently, these capacitors can hold an awful lot of charge and give you quite a nasty shock if you're not aware of that. If you're not quite sure how to discharge capacitors, then I suspect the best bet to do is just to leave it stood for a couple of days and just let them discharge naturally. So I've got this one here to do. There we go. Come on, here you come. Can I get the washer out at the same time here? Yes, there we go. This is where I do quite like this soldering station, because it's got magnetic holders here for screws so they don't go missing. And one more to do, and then the earth. That was the last one. Two birds with one stone. They're both kind of in the same area, aren't they? Let's flip this round then. Now this power supply, I've got a picture of it just going up in smoke. I'd inherited the beeps from, I might need a smaller screwdriver for that. A friend who was doing a house clearance for his late uncles, and they've obviously not been fired up for some time, and the BBC micro itself is in a sorry state. The master less so. And clearly they've both been well used in education, a lot of these BBC micros, unless they've been owned by individuals. Have been hammered in schools and colleges up and down the country back in the 80s and 90s. Let's put that there then. That's the earth, and that should give me access, hopefully, with a bit of luck, to the final screw. I don't think this screwdriver is good enough. I'm just going to pause the video at this point whilst I struggle to get this final screw out. Right, I think that's the final screw out now. So look, see if this circuit board is going to move. Hey, yep, that's definitely coming out. I think it's coming out. I've not missed anything, have I? There's always one more, isn't there? There's another green earthing strap here, by the looks of it. I thought that was all of them. That was on the other side, wasn't it? Yeah, not paying attention here. So let's get this fella out. There we go. Holding onto a bolt on the other side with these pliers. Light a bit so you can see what's going on. Move those out of the way. Let's just remove that connector. Oh, that security washer's just fallen out. I'm just going to recover that later. And there we have it. We're out. Just get this washer out before I forget. There we go. Don't want to lose that, do we? Shorting the power supply out after I've fixed it. So let's just put that on there so we know where it belongs. And what we'll do, so I don't get these mixed up, is I will just screw that back into there loosely. There we go. That's not going anywhere. And this looks okay apart from that. Might need a bit of a dust, but there's nothing drastic going on there. Mains cable looks okay. I'm going to put this to one side and then we can concentrate on this fella. So let's have a look at the health of this generally. That connector there looks okay. This is the one I was worried about. These two are the ones that I was worried about working loose, but they look okay. They're fine. I'll check that fuse is intact. It looks okay. So the fuse, you can just make it out there behind these power connectors. So I'm just going to run a quick continuity test on this to make sure that that's okay. Yep, that's the beep of success. When the power supply exploded, the fuse didn't go, which is always good. And the next step is to unsolder these. I'll just warm up my desolder gun and I'll get cracking. Let's have a look at the bottom of the board, see what the state of that is like. That's looking pretty tidy actually, that, isn't it? Very old school, big tracks, huge solder joints. I was warned on the internet that the capacitor pins may be bent over. Let's have a look, which ones are they? So it'll be these two. They don't look too bent over, which is fine. That one and that one. Get my pointing pencil out. So it looks like those two are going to be unsoldered. Second RIFA is next to the fuse, so that's, make sure I unsolder the right thing. I think that's the second RIFA there. That's probably the fuse there. And capacitor 9, which is here, is probably that one. Let's have a look. Yes, it's probably that on that. They look a bit bent over. I don't think that'll cause me much difficulty. Maybe I might need to use a soldering iron and bend them up with a pair of pliers before I start desoldering. We'll see. Desolder gun is now up to temperature, so let's have a crack at this then. So we'll desolder the big one first, which are these two pins. 400 degrees, a little bit higher than I normally do, but there we go. I think that's gone fairly well, hasn't it? You've got to love desoldering guns. They do take a lot of the aggro out of desoldering components off boards. Oh, it's actually fallen through prematurely. Let's clean up the area. There we go. Put that back. Let's see if we can wiggle this free. That is a rare occurrence. The component has practically fallen out. There we go. So this is the damaged one. You can see here where it's the blue smoke that makes this work escape through that hole. They dry out, I presume. And I'd probably suggest, if you are going to turn on a BBC micro for the first time after it's been left stood for a while, or you've got one that you use on a regular basis and you're not quite sure of the heritage of the capacitors, it's probably worthwhile doing this exercise just to service the power supply, because it can be quite alarming when the power supplies do go pop. And to be perfectly honest, it still smells a bit off now, this power supply. So let me just make sure I'm desoldering the right component here. So a number of times I've desoldered the wrong component by mistake. I think that's the fuse holder, so that will be, fingers crossed, it's that pin and that pin. Again, that one and that one. Yeah, looks right. There's nothing else in that vicinity. Well, here goes anyway. One down. Two down. Let's see if that pops out as easily as it's... Oh yeah, look at that. This one's also knackered by the looks of it. There we go. Actually, this one's not too bad, but you can see the... I don't know what the casing is made out of, but it's starting to craze a little bit. It's certainly not in the best condition. Looks like some kind of, I don't know, epoxy covering or something. Yeah, 2 down. That went well, better than I expected. So it's just capacitor 9 now. Let's identify where that is. That's there. Problem with these tracks is like crazy paving. It's difficult to work out what's going on. It's not like they're all straight, they're all over the place. So capacitor 9. Yeah. I'm just going to double check this. Back again. I've double checked. Fortunately, the board is quite translucent, so you can hold it up to the light and kind of position your finger behind to work out where the components are. It's definitely these 2 pins here. Famous last words. And I've marked them with a pencil so I don't lose them. So let's see if we can get this fella out. 1. This one's going to be a bit trickier, isn't it, because of the way the pin's bent. Definitely got the right components. Can I get the desolder gun on that pin? No, that's not going to have it. That's going to have to be old school, I think. Try again, one more time. I bent the pins next to each other, so it's really difficult. Oh, no, there we go. I just need to make sure I put a blubber solder back on that later. I think I've just unsoldered. Let's see if this fella is the right capacitor. It does look that way. I might need a bit more encouragement on this second pin here. Actually, that is not the right component, is it? What have I desoldered there? Okay. Looks like I've desoldered a... Ah, okay, that is interesting. Okay, I'll solder that back up in a minute. No biggie. Must be this fella here then. I'm going to end up desoldering half this board, aren't I, before I find the right one. Yep, that fella there. So ignore me. I know what I'm talking. No, not what I'm talking about. That was the wrong side. I actually need to desolder this one here, I think. As you watch me disassemble all of a BBC power supply by mistake, very interesting. Which one did I say it was? That one. Hopefully it's this one. The only other thing it could be is this one here. So I'll actually start. Yeah, that's the one. Got there in the end. Ah, there you go. You can see that it wasn't straight. I was expecting the pins to be horizontal, but they're not. They're at a jaunty angle, and there's your problem. So I've partially unsoldered that. and I've partially unsoldered L3, whatever that is, but they can get soldered back again. That's not a biggie. That is not a biggie at all. So just to be clear, when you come to unsolder yours, the ones that need to be unsoldered are this one here and this one here. So the RIFAs are here. That's the big one. That's the small one. And then capacitor 9's here. So hopefully you won't make the same mistake I do. So let's get these new capacitors in then. So we've got C1, which is a 10 nanofarad X2. And we've got C2, which is 100 nanofarad X2 RIFA. This might also be marked 0.1 UF, but mine's marked 100N. Now these aren't polarised, so it doesn't really matter which way they're going to go in, unlike the electrolytic, which I'm going to put in. So I'll put those in last. The electrolytic here is a 20 UF part, and the negative pin is usually shorter, sorry. Positive pin's longer, and you can see that it's clearly marked there, minus. And the board itself, I'll just bring it closer to the camera, is helpfully marked with a plus there. So by inference, the negative pin needs to go through there. So let's put that fella in first. So negative pin. Oh, there we go. Push that fella in. Just bend the pin slightly. That's that one done. And let's put these in. I noticed that C2, there's a couple of holes, presumably they were intending on putting different size capacitors in. So you see it's 4 holes, only 2 pins, so that's not a problem. I'm going to put these so that the component values are the right way, easily readable. That's the top of the board with the writing, so because I'm OCD, I'll have the writing pointing in the right way. So there's C2 in there. Bend the pins to hold it into place slightly. And C1. And goes in here. Let's move this out of the way a second. Oh dear. You will go in. They're the right size, that's brilliant. So that's C1 in place. Let's bend the pins slightly to hold it in place. And that is that. So we've got the capacitors in place, they just need soldering. I've got my soldering iron nice and hot. So I'll get onto that straight away. Flip the board over. Let's do some soldering. I've already snipped the leads on these. Are you a snip before or a snip after kind of guy? Well, I tend to snip before because it makes it a little bit easier to get the solder to flow around the component pin rather than snipping afterwards. So I'm going to re-tin my soldering iron. There we go. A bit of a clean. And let's solder these parts. So the first thing I'm going to do is get these RIFAs soldered. So I've got the soldering iron at a nice temperature, hopefully. There we go, one down. Two down. Happy with that joint. The final stage before we put this back in the beeb is to reassemble it. I'll get the case back. I'm not going to test it as is. I'm going to assume all my solder joints are fine. It looks okay to me. Make sure that we get this in the right way. So the main side is here, and so that connector for the drives goes there. So let's slide this back in. Oh, easier said than done. That connector's getting in the way a bit, isn't it? There we go. And start pushing everything back in. So the first thing I'm going to do is connect up these brown, blue, red, black. Perfect. That is now good to test. There's only one way to do this, and that's to plug it in. It's unusual, these BBC power supplies, I think to save on having fat tracks all the way around carrying the 5-volt power rails. You actually get 3 wires coming off here, 5-volt ground, 5-volt ground, and a third one here, that carry the current to various parts of the board. It's quite a unique design, I think, at least amongst the computers I've taken apart anyway. And there is also this wire here, which I believe is -5 volts. So, the moment of truth. Does it work? Right, got the meter. I've set it to DC, a 20-volt range. I'm going to turn the light off because it's reflecting off the display. There we go. Okay. Let's turn it on. A little bit on the high side, 5 volts, but it's not generating a load and it's within scope. I think I'm happy with that. I don't think there's a way to adjust these power supplies anyway. There is on the master, so that's 5 volts. I assume all of these will be as well. But it's worth testing whilst I'm here. I hope this doesn't explode on me. That's 5 volts. That's good. Just double check the last one. It's your 5 volts, isn't it? And I guess I'd better check this -5 volts one now. I think it's -5 volts. So just connect that to a ground. -4.5 volts. Good. Job is a good one. Refit this into Model B and see whether or not it works. I'm not going to soak test this anymore. I'm going to turn it off. And that is how you refurbish a BBC Model B power supply. I hope you've enjoyed watching, as ever. If you like what I'm doing, subscribe to the channel or head over to my blog, breakintoprogram.co.uk. And I will catch you in the next video where I'll be doing exactly the same, but this time it will be for a BBC Master 128 power supply, which hasn't gone boom.